Yo, what is good? Welcome into the show. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now, and on the docket for today's show, some blockbuster trade targets that could really improve this Eagles secondary. We're going to talk about Patrick Surtain potentially coming to Philadelphia, as well as a move for Budda Baker at safety. But also, Bleacher Report coming out with a couple of Eagles trade candidates who the Eagles could deal this offseason. Pretty marquee names in Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat, as well as Kevin Byard. But first, before we get started, I'm Chase Sr. Thanks for joining the show and giving us an opportunity to inform you. I think we do a good job of that. And thanks for taking time out of your day to make us a part of your day. There are so many content options out there, so anytime you stop by and you hang out with us, we certainly appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe because the Eagles are going to be making a ton of moves this offseason. We're going to cover every single one of them. I will be in Las Vegas to cover the Super Bowl. We'll be doing shows live from Super Bowl Radio Row, catching up with a lot of insiders, hopefully some current and former NFL players, talking all things Eagles, so you don't want to miss our coverage. Let's first start today's show by taking a look at the Eagles' offseason needs. My two biggest needs for this team, linebacker and cornerback, and then you could throw in safety. So let's call it three major offseason needs for Philadelphia. I think that the Eagles could certainly upgrade at wide receiver 3, especially with what happened in the playoff game against the Buccaneers. You have A.J. Brown go down, who doesn't play in that game. You have Julio Jones, who gets knocked out with that concussion. And Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Britton Covey are getting significant snaps at wide receiver 3. Not good enough. I do think Philadelphia is going to address that position in the NFL draft. I wouldn't mind seeing DeAndre Swift come back. I also wouldn't hate resetting the running back clock and drafting a rookie at some point, an affordable asset who could really help this offense behind this still very good Eagles offensive line. Getting a right guard, obviously, is Jason Kelce dependent, a right tackle for the future because Lane Johnson getting a little bit older, and I think that Philadelphia at defensive end and defensive tackle could bolster up the depth right there. And when you think about blockbuster trade targets who really move the needle for the Eagles this offseason, it's hard to get better than Patrick Surtain II. And according to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, the Eagles had interest in Surtain going into the deadline. Can you imagine if they made that move? I guarantee you the Eagles' defensive struggles wouldn't have been as bad as they were if they would have traded for Patrick Surtain. And I think that the Eagles should still have interest in trading for Surtain. We'll take a look at his numbers, coming up. But of course, we do have to talk about the James Bradberry situation because that could play a role in the Eagles' ability or inability to address corner and whether or not they make a trade for an expensive player or try to go the more fiscally responsible route and save some money in the draft by taking a corner. If you want to cut James Bradberry, he has a dead cap hit of $17.2 million, which means you cut him, you have to eat that money. He also has a 2024 option bonus of $9.64 million in guaranteed money. The Eagles would also have to pay the rest of the guaranteed money on his contract as well as the signing bonus. So unless the Eagles just absorb that dead cap hit charge of $17 million, James Bradberry might be back. But if he has to ride the pine and just be cornerback depth, and if you can upgrade at that position with a young stud, a young dog in Surtain, I'm still doing it. And we know that Howie Roseman is very aggressive. What Surtain gives you, a top shutdown corner who's one of the best young, up-and-coming cornerbacks in the NFL. He's still only 23 years old. Now, the path in acquiring him, you're going to have to give up at least a first-round pick, maybe two and another player, and you're probably going to have to sign him to a contract extension. He'll be eligible for a fifth-year option because he was a first-round pick. I love the size, speed, athleticism combo, and the good news is before that contract extension sets in and comes into play, if you exercise that fifth-year option, that's 2 more years on that rookie deal. And you look at what Surtain has done in his first 3 years in the NFL. Long, rangy, physical, fast, just an outside corner who can stick with some of the best wide receivers in the game. 2021 had 4 picks, 14 pass breakups, a Pro Football Focus coverage grade of 66.3. Solid numbers for a rookie. In year 2, 2 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, a Pro Football Focus coverage grade of 86.7. Now, that Broncos defense was a little bit of a disaster in 2023, so his numbers did go down a little bit. 1 pick, 12 pass breakups, and a coverage grade of 64.7. I know there's a better player in there than what he put on tape in 2023, and in Vic Fangio's system, I think he can really elevate a lot of marquee players on this Eagles defense. And I did see a Bleacher Report trade idea that I think is pretty interesting, and it could be about the asking price for a player of Surtain's caliber. The Eagles would receive Patrick Surtain II, and then the Broncos get a 2024 first-round pick, which is 22nd overall, a 5th-round pick. The Eagles have a bunch of them. And then you also put in Josh Sweat into that deal as well, so that the Broncos get an edge rusher for a player who's going into the final year of his contract. So would you make this trade? T for trade, P for pass. This will be the pinned comment on today's show, so go on down and let us know what you're feeling about this move for Philadelphia. Coming up next, another blockbuster trade target. We're talking Budda Baker. Stay tuned for that. But first, today's Eagles Now is sponsored by Prize Picks, the largest independently run daily fantasy sports app in North America, and the best deal that any DFS app has to offer. $100 deposit match at prizepicks.com/CLNS. The picks that I like for Super Bowl 58 in Viva Las Vegas. Patrick Mahomes more than a half passing yard. So Prize Picks will run a lot of specials like that. I'm pretty damn sure that Patrick Mahomes is going to have more than a half passing yard. Isaiah Pacheco more than a half rushing and receiving touchdown combined, and then Brock Purdy more than 248.5 passing yards. So it's prizepicks.com/CLNS, the easiest app to use for daily fantasy sports. You pick 2 or more players, you choose more or less on their projected stat lines. We'll put that link down below in the comments section and in the description of this video. So, again, you look at these Eagles offseason needs. Linebacker, corner, safety. We'll get to some linebacker targets at another point, but I've already talked about Patrick Queen and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. a lot, so in a sense, we've been able to hit on those positions. Safety, though. You pair up Budda Baker with Reed Blankenship, and you find a way to move on from Kevin Byard, this defense improves overnight. The Eagles have been linked, just like Patrick Surtain, to Budda Baker previously. Does a rebuilding Cardinals team want to pay big money to a safety who's in the final year of his contract, who wants to win? And again, the purpose and one of the importances of coaching and having a good scheme is maximizing players, putting them in a position to succeed. And I think that Budda Baker, as a chess piece, as a guy who can play in the slot, who can play hybrid linebacker, who can be included in blitz packages, who can play deep safety, I think that he too could thrive in Vic Fangio's system. If the Eagles cut Kevin Byard, the Eagles can save outright $14 million. And I actually think that's the move if they don't restructure that contract, because Kevin Byard at $14 million at this stage of his career, way too expensive. And Budda Baker, younger and about at that same price point. Budda Baker is a versatile, all-around defensive player who's a game changer because of that. And if you don't address linebacker specifically, maybe you use Budda Baker as a player in that C.J. Gardner-Johnson role or in that type of Tyrann Mathieu role where he can play a couple of different positions on this defense. He can blitz, play in coverage. He's a hard hitter, and he's a playmaker. The Budda contract for 2024. The Cardinals did restructure it going into the year. He wanted a little bit of uptick in pay, so Arizona gave that to one of their franchise icons. He has a base salary in 2024 of $14.2 million and then a cap hit of $19 million. Again, Eagles are going to be able to afford that potentially if they make a couple of realistic moves. We broke down Howie Roseman's 5-step plan on how to do that earlier this week. Check the video out to be informed. Now, Budda did only play in 12 games in 2023, so naturally his numbers were down, but to still have 87 tackles in those 12 games goes to show you the instinctual player that Budda Baker is. And if we're talking Blankenship and Budda as your safety tandem in Vic Fangio's system, I'm certainly down for that, especially if this Eagles defensive line can get home a little bit better. And then, as part of that Bleacher Report article that we alluded to a little bit earlier, here are some Eagles trade assets that they talked about. Haason Reddick, I would not trade him away. Josh Sweat, Kevin Byard. I would think about maybe trading those players away. Now, I think the route that Philadelphia is going to go is giving Haason Reddick a contract extension. That would save Philadelphia $11.8 million. This year, 11 sacks, 67 pressures, 41 hurries, 23 quarterback hits, and 13 tackles for loss. Those sack numbers were down. They went down from 16 to 11, and last year in that playoff run, he was a menace against New York, against San Francisco. Reddick is still a very good and productive player. 4 straight seasons of double-digit sacks, all 3 of those seasons, with different teams. First player to do that in NFL history. And Haason Reddick, he's still only 29 years old. I did not see an athletic decline from him. As for Josh Sweat, if the Eagles are worried about money here, they could extend him, and they could save $2.5 million. This year, 6.5 sacks, but he had 5.5 through 9 games, and then had no sacks until Week 18. The overall raw numbers for Josh Sweat in 2023 were not bad. And when we talk about Reddick's sack numbers going down, the sack numbers for literally the entire team, every player, they all went down. The Eagles had 70 sacks in 2022, not even close in 2023. Sweat still with 6.5 sacks, 45 hurries, 16 quarterback hits, and then 68 pressures. And then there's Kevin Byard. Cutting Byard would save the Eagles $14 million. That sounds very logical right there. And all they would have to eat in dead money, $346,000. That is a blip on the radar of $14 million. Byard, 23rd highest graded safety according to Pro Football Focus, and he did have a career high in tackles, but sometimes for a safety, that's not a good thing. That means that a lot of players are getting to that second and third level, and then the safety is at the last line of defense and having to make that stop. If you're still rocking with us on today's show, give me a real one down below. As always, we appreciate you for being here, and thanks for supporting the program.